Well, hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Soul Care Nomad. My name is Matthew Wilbanks and I'm here with the world traveler, Dr. John Okinaga, who we're both recording in different places. Dr. O, you're at home and
Yep.
I'm in my parents' house in Texarkana.
Nice.
Yeah.
We should have just recorded when I was in Japan.
Yes. But that kind of brings up our little topic, Japan. Dr. O, want to take this time to talk about how your trip to Japan went and what are some highlights about it, and kind of just in general, what are some needs that Japan has that especially us who are outside the country can pray for. But first off, how did your trip go?
I'm tired. So, I mean, I didn't, I think I even mentioned this before. I didn't plan this trip so well.
Mm.
I left on a Sunday, landed in Japan on a Monday, and I flew back on a Sunday. So basically, by the time I acclimated to the time, which was on Sunday, I flew back that day.
Yep.
So I was I was going to sleep at 7:30 and waking up at 3 for the first 5 days.
Mm.
And then legitimately the day I got to like normal time, which is sleep at 10, wake up at 6, I flew back to America.
Nice.
Yeah.
Mm.
Not so bright. And then so I was trying to get back onto American time, and then finally, what day was it? Wednesday I woke up at 6. I'm back on American time. And then Wednesday night, Nicole found a lost dog in the middle of the road, brought it home. So I stayed up with that dog till like 3 in the morning yesterday. So I am, yeah, not good.
Doing great.
This morning, like, can we record later? Because I don't know where I'm at.
But what were some highlights of your trip?
Highlights. We always say we evangelize the lost and teach the saved. So I challenged we had 80 something people show up for the training. So day one of training, I challenged them, hey, you know, the importance of evangelism is, we're in Japan, second most unreached people group in the world. So I asked them, how many of you have a friend or loved one who doesn't know Jesus? And so all the hands went up, and so I challenged them, I want you to share the gospel with someone. And on the last day, asked them, well, what'd you guys learn? Or, what was the main takeaway? And one of the people raised their hand and said, I did your challenge. I shared the gospel with one of my friends, invited them to a Bible study. So I guess this was Friday night. I invited them to a Bible study on Friday night after, we had done our trainings ended at about 6.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess they had a Bible study on that night, and they led someone to the Lord.
Wow.
Yeah. And then we closed with prayer on Saturday, and um, just taking prayer requests. And so I got um, 25 names of people that they were going to evangelize this week.
Mm.
So, I mean, usually when I do these trainings, I focus on how many people signed up for phase 2 after doing phase 1. And those numbers are great and all, but yeah, the greatest thing was someone came to know the Lord.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yep. And where were you in Japan? I don't think we ever said that.
Oh, this time I was in Osaka.
Okay.
Yeah, because we were in Nagoya last time, so I was in Osaka this time.
Okay. How was I know a lot of Japanese stuff that is especially food, and Osaka is normally in the conversation of having like really good food. So how was it?
I actually didn't have that much time for food.
Oh,
I mean, this time we were at a seminary up in the mountains.
oh, okay.
So we were, I think the closest restaurant for where we're at, they said was 25 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
And they had traditional Japanese food the entire time I was there. And I don't eat fish.
Mm,
So, yeah, that was quite interesting.
yeah.
So I told them I'm fasting.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's one way to get around it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, well, I didn't want to be rude and say I'm not going to eat your food. So
That's true.
I just said, oh, I'm not. I said, oh, I'm fasting because I'm fat and I'm trying to lose weight, which is true. But in America, I usually fast breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
So I just switched to fasting to dinner. But then they looked at me and they're like, yeah, this guy doesn't fast. So they asked one of the Japanese people on our team, like, is there something wrong? And they said, oh, he doesn't eat fish or seafood. So the next day, I ended up having like frozen pizzas show up in my refrigerator. Yeah.
Oh, see, I would be all over that because I love fish and seafood, and so that would be something that I love. I'm, for one, am very glad that the dietary laws of the Old Testament were lifted so that I can enjoy all
Shellfish.
types of good food.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was, but, we, I had one day where I could order, whatever I want. So that was Saturday night, I had Wagyu shabu shabu. And then Sunday lunch, I had Kobe steak.
Ooh, dang.
No, so I had good food. At least, my last two meals were excellent.
Yeah, the last little bit.
Yeah.
Now, I know when we went to Nagoya, um, a lot of questions were around uh, kind of anxiety, suicide, um, and then eventually uh, kind of talked about homosexuality. What were some topics of questions that some of the students had this time around?
Um, the session we went over for sure was a suicide lecture,
Mm-hmm.
suicide and anxiety. So we, I kind of changed it up a bit. We ended in we had like a 45-minute prayer session at the end of our suicide lecture, and that went a lot longer than I had anticipated. So
Mm-hmm.
it bled into some other lecture time, but the I really told it's not you can't stop someone from committing suicide. That's outside of our control. But I said it's not your fault, and that I guess that was something a new. It was a new perspective for the pastors and lay leaders and they were just holding on to this guilt that their loved one or friend who committed suicide, that it was their fault.
Mm,
So it was cool to see. I don't know what the heck they're praying because I don't speak in Japanese, but we had about 9 to 10 people who came up to pray, and they were just pouring their hearts out,
mm,
telling God that they're sorry for holding on to the guilt and shame. And it was, I mean, they were going, I mean, we talk about wailing prayer in the Old Testament. I'd never seen a wailing prayer,
yeah.
but that's what, these Japanese pastors and lay leaders were doing. I mean, just pouring out their soul. And I had no idea, because I had Chris as my translator again.
Mm,
Um, but Chris didn't translate into English for me, so I just kind of sat there like a bump on a log, like
yeah.
clueless what's going on. But then Chris shared with me what they were saying, and it just really was a reminder of how much suicide is impacting Japan right now.
Mm,
Because, I asked, how many of you have a loved one or friend who's committed suicide? Every hand went up,
yeah.
and that was just, they're really thirsty for, the process on helping someone navigate when someone's suicidal, just the practical advice and then also the biblical approach. So
Mm,
that was good to see, for sure.
yeah. Yeah, because I know in Japanese culture, you can actually pay like a is something I don't remember what it is. You can actually pay like a company to like remove all your records, and then you can move somewhere else and live a completely different life because of um, you've committed a great shame or something. A lot of times people will just commit suicide, but even that um, is something that happens a lot in Japan of just completely removing yourself from public records. Um, and so that whole idea of honor and shame is very very real to a Japanese person,
Yeah,
especially because they have to fit in, and if they don't meet that criteria, it's almost like the only thing they can do is remove themselves.
yeah. I mean, the crazy part with Japan is and suicide, they view it as uh, a good thing. Like
Mm,
they're removing a burden from their family, and I really had to hammer home like that. That's not, well, one, that's not biblical.
mm-hmm,
That's not biblical at all. But second, it's like you're not removing a burden because the people left behind have to deal with the wreckage of your decision.
yep.
And I said it is the most selfish decision that someone can make. And I remember the first time, because this is my third training in Japan in the last 18 months. And I remember our first time we talked about suicide, I got pushed back on, someone really pushed back on, no, it's not selfish. It's actually, whatever. We're helping. And I'm like, no, it's not. And so I said, how I help them understand that. So I asked that person who said it's not selfish because the person is removing the burden. I was like, do you miss that person? And they're like, yes. And so I was like, how's the burden removed?
Mm,
And it's kind of like a light bulb went on for that person. Like, oh yeah, it's not removing a burden. That person was actually selfish in what they did. So, yeah.
yeah. um so a big thing always for us is prayer. um Obviously you can look at the IMB statistics and all that good stuff, but Japan is one of the top, I think the second most unreached people group to the gospel.
Hmm.
Big prayer need obviously is number one, that God would send harvest to Japan. Always a needed thing, but also more specifically, I mean, Dr. O, for you just being there, what were some prayer needs that you kind of saw for the people in Japan?
Um, it's just heavy there, man.
Mm,
Um, you just feel this heaviness when you step foot in Japan, and that's because there's no Jesus there. The hard part with ministering to the Japanese people is they're basically good people.
mm,
Even though those who are Buddha. I mean, look at my grandmother, my dad's mom. It was hard to evangelize my grandma
mm,
because she was a good person. Didn't. She was kind and caring and kind, caring, a servant. She was the eldest out of, I think, 9 kids.
mm-hmm,
She basically was, for some of my great aunts and uncles, like a mother figure, like opening up her home, having, we had family stayed with my grandma and my grandpa because they didn't have money or whatever. So I mean, from an exterior perspective, she checked off all the marks of a Christian.
mm,
In fact, even better than Christians.
yeah.
So and morally, couldn't approach her morally. Like She didn't swear. She, yeah, never cheated on my grandpa. Always was taking care of the grandkids. So how do you, from that perspective, from a works base, nothing.
Mm.
But she didn't know Jesus. So, we prayed for my grandma Okinaga and grandpa Okinaga for decades.
Mm-hmm.
And by God's grace, my grandfather accepted the Lord in 1999,
Mm.
and grandma Okinaga accepted the Lord maybe a year later. And I helped take care of my grandmother after my grandfather died. I moved into to take care of my grandma, and you know what? I did hear wailing prayer before this last. I heard wailing prayer with my grandma Okinaga, and it would be in the morning. She'd wake up and she would say, she would ask God for forgiveness for her not for her rejecting Jesus for the first 70 something years of her life,
Wow.
and she would wake up at 5 6 in the morning, and she would start her day in prayer
Mm.
and spent time in the Word, and um, but to for that conversion to happen with my grandmother, it took, like I said, decades of prayer. And it's like, who's praying for the Japanese people? It sure as heck ain't other Japanese people,
Mm.
and people love to send mission teams to Japan. I and Hawaii tries to send mission teams to Japan all the time,
Mm-hmm.
but they just go to evangelize. They don't go to actually train the pastors on how to do the work better.
Right.
I see a pastor friend of mine. He goes every year, and it's just and yes, evangelism needs to take place. But what happens when he leaves?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing, because we're not training the Japanese people on how to evangelize the lost and teach the saved.
Yeah.
We go do the work for them without actually training them. The one of the good things that happened this trip is, so this was a Japanese speaking team, Matt. So I think you would only know Chris, because Chris came to translate us for a couple days in
Mm-hmm.
Nagoya last year. But we're forming a partnership with OIC, which is a biblical counseling organization affiliated with ACBC.
Okay.
And well, what I have really, really hammered home this trip is I told them I'm only committing 10 years to training. I'm only committing 10 years to Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of looked at me funny, and they're like, "What do you mean by that?" And what I said is, I don't want you to become dependent on me.
Mm-hmm.
I need, we need, not I said, we need to raise up Japanese biblical counseling leaders where you don't need me in 10 years.
Yep.
I'll come and do, if you want, at that point I said, hey, the condition in 10 years is you're flying out James or Nicole. Like, we should have enough people signed up by then where we could realistically fly out James and Nicole. And, but I said, what I want in 10 years is we have a Japanese ACBC fellow. We have
Mm-hmm.
Japanese ACBC members that, once you become a fellow, you can do the training for ACBC
Yep.
certification. And I said, that's what I want. I want to train the leaders where you don't need my voice anymore. They're like, well, and they push back, obviously. Well, you work for Southwestern. There's clout with your position. I said, I understand that, and I accept that, but I said I don't like organizations or churches where we come in and do the work for you, and then once we leave, the work is done until we
Mm-hmm.
come back in a year. And I said that model is rubbish. I probably said a different word, because we're not equipping you to do the work. We're doing the work for you. And you know me, I'm not that guy. I don't like that model.
Yeah.
So I'm working. Chris is, we already translated the Hard Issues book into Japanese.
Mm.
Um, Chris is, as we speak, he's translating My Loved One is an Addict book for addicts right
Okay.
now. And then, I've been working on that addictions program to replace other programs that are out there. So um, I need to finish that this summer,
Mm-hmm.
and he's going to translate that. But I'm trying to get, so they're going to translate Dr. Balber's book, Counseling by the Book. I got to talk to Dr. Johnson again and see if he'd agree to have Church as a Counsel of Care translated.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got to get Balber to agree to get Competent to Counsel by Adams released to get translated to Japanese. So what we're going to be doing in the next, I've done 3 trips here. So they have me for another 8.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So in the next 8.5 years, what we're going to try to do is to also get certain, biblical counseling books approved to be translated into Japanese.
Yeah.
So, Competent to Counsel, and try to get Trip to agree to release. So Welch should be When People Are Big and God Is Small. Welch, Instrument in the Redeemer's Hand. So kind of like my favorite books,
Yeah.
getting them translated into Japanese.
Mm.
So I recently became an ACB. Oh, I don't know if I told you, but I became a fellow for ACBC.
I saw your Facebook post.
Yeah, so I was officially given that title on Wednesday.
Mm.
So I'm really gonna, I've already talked to Dr. Johnson about this, and just really, Japan and Peru is going to be my focus.
Mm-hmm.
So Gady's actually in Peru right now with
Yeah, I saw.
Mandy.
I saw him having fun down there with Joey.
Yeah, so they're bringing me out next summer. So I'll be doing Peru first week of June, and then Japan first week of July.
Ugh. Well, at least Peru's in a similar time zone.
Yeah,
Ooh.
yeah, I'm not too smart.
Hey, you have a year to plan out those trips, so you've got it. Um, so one thing I want to do before we call it quits is obviously uh, just a little recap for Japan. Pray for pastors to get good training.
Right.
Because another thing, you didn't mention this, but a lot of pastors in Japan are senior adults and have no uh, kind of apprentice behind them. They don't have anyone who's coming behind them. So you have 60, 70, 80-year-old men who are carrying all the weight.
Yeah, 75% of all Japanese pastors are over the age of 60.
Mm-hmm.
Japanese churches are actually shrinking right now because the pastors are dying off. So they went from 8,000 10 years ago. I think it was 10 years ago. 8,000, and now they're down to 6,000. And, unless we start to train up these younger people in the church to become pastors, eventually it's going to die.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that was another thing. I talked to Dr. Grace, so that's our provost at Southwestern. I talked to Madison on Tuesday or Monday. I was at work on Monday, Matt. Does that shock you?
No, it doesn't. I expected it to happen, but I'm also like, man, that guy really is dumb sometimes.
Yeah, I'm dumb. I was, yeah, I was at work the day after I flew back. But I talked to Madison and just kind of shared like, hey, they don't want to just do biblical counseling. If we can get other professors who are willing to go and do training, like Japan needs us.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm supposed to talk with him. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But we're going to talk. But we don't, churches. We don't just need you to go there and do evangelism, to do a mission trip for your. Hear me, people. I'm not discounting mission trips. That's not what I'm saying. But they need more than that.
Mm-hmm.
They need pastors who have doctorates to go and train. So here, I'll rephrase. If you have terminal degree, or shoot, even if you have a MDiv, go there and train them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I did 20, I think 20 something hours of training in 3 days. you know, train them on how to evangelize, train them how to do exegetical preaching, train them how to do Sunday school, train them. Don't do the work for them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, duplicate. So even if you, hey, even if you're a pastor or a seminary professor or whatever skill you have, you're like, well, I only had 5 people show up for training, so what good does that do? Well, you now just created 5 of you to go do the work 365 days a year
Mm-hmm.
instead of you going there to do it for 8. So I mean, if we start to train the Japanese people, and if you're listening to the podcast, you're like, well, I don't have anything you just said. Well, you can pray for them,
Mm.
but say you have a skill like, and this is dead serious, all the Japanese pastors are bivocational. Their churches are so small that they can't afford to just live off of tithe.
Yep.
So say you're a businessman or you have some sort of profession that you're an entrepreneur. Go train the Japanese pastors on how to do your job so that they can actually have more time devoted to preparing their sermons or more time devoted to um, shepherding the flock.
Mm-hmm.
See, all of us have a role to play. You don't have to have a seminary degree to go train people in Japan. But if we go train them in how to like make a living, where instead of working in a factory for 60 hours a week and then they work 20 hours a week prepping the sermons and shepherding, that we can get them to where they can survive off of 20 hours of work, where they have 20 hours to shepherd and prepare. Good. Let's go train them. So instead of just going to feed a man fish and he eats for a day, or teach a man to fish, and go teach these Japanese people how to fish.
Mm.
Quit giving them the fish.
Yep.
Sorry, that's my little rant off my
Yep.
short pedestal.
Yeah. So we'll end it with this.
Oh, I also just text you the 25 names, Matt.
Yeah, I got it.
If people who are listening can pray for these people,
Mm-hmm.
and if you can't read because you're lazy, it's Yoshihiro, Tagetoshi, Keiko, Yoko, Daryl, Keiko, Shizuka, Kyoko, Koichi, Hisaie, Mikki, Makoto, Naoko, Atsushi, Sachiko, Masanori, Eriko, Takanori, Yuko, Akira, Takashi, Sayaka, Takeshi, and Ayane. If you can pray for them, that would be great.
Yep. So we'll finish it off with this. Um, Matthew 9, starting in verse 35, Jesus continued going around all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and every sickness. When he saw the crowds, he felt compassion on them because they were distressed and dejected, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is abundant, but the workers are few. Therefore, pray to the Lord of harvest to send out workers into his harvest." Um, the best thing you can do, even in this moment, is to pray for Japan. Pray for the pastors. Pray for the church members to have the courage to step out and share their faith. And it is something that will alienate them from their culture, even more so than it is for us here in America.
Yeah, I mean, there's people that have been like their family has like disowned them.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah. So it takes a lot of strength to do that. So pray to the Lord of harvest, not just to send workers, but also to strengthen the workers that are over there.
yeah,
So
that'd be great.
that is all the time we have for this week. Thank you for listening to Soul Care Nomad, and we will see y'all in the next one.
Yeah, be good. Don't be stupid.
Bye, everybody.